I'm Rear Admiral Vivian Ellis, 42 years old, a career Navy officer who started as a girl holding an acceptance letter her father said would lead nowhere. For 2 decades, I pushed forward anyway, serving, leading, and chasing a kind of respect that never came from the one person I wanted it from most. I gave years of loyalty, silence, and second chances to a man who taught me discipline but never believed I'd earn my place in uniform. When he mocked me at his own retirement and his former commanding officer saluted me in front of everyone, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed or underestimated by someone you loved and spent your life trying to prove yourself to? Tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being written off, tap that like button and subscribe for more true stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. I was 17 the first time my father said, "The Navy's no place for a girl." We were standing in the garage, him with grease under his nails, me holding my acceptance letter to the Naval Academy. He wasn't cruel about it, just matter of fact, the way he'd tell you the weather forecast. The kind of man who believed respect was earned in oil-stained hands and salt-crusted boots, not in officers' whites. He'd spent 26 years working his way up from seaman recruit to chief petty officer. Every stripe on his sleeve represented bruised knuckles, missed birthdays, and deployments that stretched longer than promised. When I told him I wanted to follow in his footsteps, he smiled, actually smiled, until I mentioned Annapolis. "College." He set down his wrench. "Navy doesn't need more brass, sweetheart. Needs more people willing to do the real work." I went anyway. For years at the academy, learning navigation and leadership while he sent postcards from the Persian Gulf with messages like, "Hope you're enjoying the textbooks." After graduation, I took my commission as an ensign. He attended the ceremony, stood in the back, left before the reception. When I called to thank him for coming, he said, "Couldn't get a real job, huh?" I laughed it off. He was my father. He'd come around. He didn't. By the time I made lieutenant junior grade at 24, he'd stopped asking about my assignments. At family gatherings, he'd introduce me as my daughter, the one in the Navy, with a tone that suggested I worked in the gift shop. My cousin asked once if I'd seen combat. Before I could answer, Dad cut in. "She pushes papers on a base somewhere. Not like the old days." I was on a destroyer at the time, running combat systems checks in the South China Sea. The real shift happened when I made lieutenant at 26. I just finished a deployment, came home for Christmas, and found him in his garage, always the garage, polishing his old chief's anchors. He asked what I'd been doing. I told him about coordinating air defense exercises with Allied forces. "Sounds complicated," he said, not looking up. "Must be nice, having people do the hard stuff while you watch from an office." I left early that year. Drove 6 hours back to base, sat in my empty quarters, and wondered why I still cared what he thought. A mentor of mine, Commander Laura Price, found me in the mess hall the next morning. She took one look at my face and said, "Family trouble?" "How'd you know?" "Because you've got that look. The one that says someone you love doesn't see you." She sat down across from me. "Let me guess. Father? Brother? Father." "He was enlisted." "I'm not." She nodded slowly. "And he thinks you took a shortcut." "Something like that." "You didn't." She leaned forward. "You took a different path. Doesn't make it easier. Just different." She paused. "He'll either figure it out or he won't. But you can't make your career about proving something to him. You'll burn out trying." I thought about that conversation for years afterward. She was right, but knowing she was right didn't make the holidays any easier. Didn't make the silence after my promotions any less heavy. I made lieutenant commander at 29. Same pay grade my father had when he retired. I didn't tell him. Didn't see the point. He'd already made it clear what he thought of officers: too much education, not enough spine. At 32, I took command of a logistics coordination unit, overseeing supply chains for 3 carrier groups. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with war stories worth telling at barbecues. But it mattered. Dad heard about it through an old shipmate who'd looked me up in the Navy directory. He called me for the first time in 8 months. "So you're a commander now?" Yes, sir. Silence. Then, your mother would have been proud. She died when I was 13. Aneurysm, sudden, no warning. He'd held it together through the funeral, through the reception, through everything. Then he'd gone back to sea for 6 months and never really talked about her again. I think she'd be proud of both of us, I said carefully. Maybe. He cleared his throat. Listen, I'm having a retirement ceremony next year. You should come. If you're not too busy. It wasn't quite an invitation. More like a challenge. I'll be there, I said. Don't make it about yourself, he added, almost as an afterthought. I didn't respond to that. Just said goodbye and hung up. Commander Price found me in my office later that week. You look like someone just told you your ship's sinking. My father invited me to his retirement ceremony. That's good, isn't it? He told me not to make it about myself. She winced. Ouch! Yeah. You going? I stared at the photo on my desk, me and Dad, years ago, before everything got complicated. He was in his dress blues, I was maybe 10, grinning like I'd won the lottery just standing next to him. I don't know, I said honestly. What's the point? He's made it clear he doesn't respect what I do. Maybe that's exactly why you should go. She crossed her arms. Look, I don't know your father. But I know men like him. Career enlisted, worked their way up the hard way, watched officers come and go without getting their hands dirty. It's not about you, Vivian. It's about what you represent to him. Which is everything he couldn't be. Everything he didn't choose. She softened. That doesn't make it fair. But it might make it understandable. I thought about that conversation for months. Turned it over in my mind during night watches, during long flights to joint operations briefings, during the quiet moments when I had nothing to do but think. The truth was, I joined the Navy because of him. Because I'd watched him spit-shine his boots every Sunday. Because I'd seen the way he carried himself in uniform, the way people respected him, the way he commanded a room without raising his voice. I wanted that. Wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. But somewhere along the way, I'd become the thing he resented. At 38, I made Commander 05, the same rank he'd spent his whole career saluting. The promotion board results came out on a Thursday. I called him that night. He didn't answer. I left a message, "Hey, Dad. Just wanted you to know I made 05. Talk soon." He texted back 3 days later, "Congrats." That was it. One word. I stared at it for longer than I should have, looking for some hidden warmth, some sign that he understood what it meant. There was nothing. Commander Price took me out for drinks that weekend. He didn't call, did he? Nope. Vivian, it's fine. I set down my glass. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it fine. She was right. But what was I supposed to do? Force him to care? Demand his approval? I'd spent 20 years trying to earn his respect, and I was tired. Bone tired. The invitation to his retirement ceremony arrived 2 months later. Formal, printed, with my name misspelled, they'd written Vivian instead of Vivian. I called to confirm I'd attend. He sounded surprised. You're actually coming? You invited me. Yeah, well, figured you'd be too busy. I'll be there. Another pause. Good. That's good. It wasn't much. But it was something. The last time we spoke before his retirement, it turned ugly. He'd heard through an old shipmate that I'd been reassigned to a Joint Operations Command at Naval Station Norfolk. The call came on a Tuesday, 0900 hours, while I was reviewing deployment schedules. So, desk job. His voice had that edge I'd learned to recognize, half curiosity, half condemnation. Forward coordination, I said evenly. Multi-domain operations. We synchronize air, sea, and ground assets for sounds like a desk job. I closed my eyes. Counted to 3. It's strategic level planning, Dad. Someone has to coordinate these operations. Sure. I could practically hear him shaking his head. Real sailors stay at sea, though. That's what we used to say. I've done my time at sea. Have you? The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Or did you do a couple cruises and then bail for the air conditioning? I spent for years on destroyers. 2 deployments. One of them extended because of the situation in yeah. I'm sure it was real hard, sitting in the CIC while the deck crew actually worked. Something in me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet crack, like ice giving way. Why did you invite me to your ceremony? I asked. What? Why invite me if you're just going to? I stopped myself. Took a breath. Started over. If you don't respect what I do, why do you want me there? Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, because you're my daughter. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. His voice had changed, gone quieter. Look, I don't understand your world. All the acronyms, the joint this and strategic that. In my Navy, you fixed things, you shot things, you kept the ship running. Simple. My Navy isn't simple. No, I guess it's not. Another pause. But it's still the Navy. That's gotta count for something. It should have felt like progress. Maybe it was. But it didn't feel like enough. I'll be at your ceremony, I said. But I need you to understand something. I'm not coming to make it about myself. I'm coming because I'm proud of what you accomplished. 26 years is no small thing. You earned every promotion, every ribbon, every bit of respect you got. I've never once thought otherwise. I know that. Do you? Because sometimes it feels like you think I'm embarrassed by where you came from. Like I chose the academy to get away from the enlisted side. My throat tightened. Dad, I chose it because of you. Because you showed me what service looks like. You think I don't respect what you did? You're wrong. Dead wrong. The line went so quiet I checked to make sure we were still connected. Your mother used to say I was too stubborn for my own good, he finally said. Guess she was right. Guess she was. I'll see you at the ceremony, Vivian. He pronounced my name correctly for once. And wear your uniform. If you want to. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. We hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time afterward, staring at nothing, feeling something shift in my chest. Not resolution, exactly. Not forgiveness. Just space. A little more room to breathe. Commander Price knocked on my door around 1300 hours. You okay? You look shell-shocked. Just talked to my father. She came in, closed the door. Good talk or bad talk? Both? Neither? I honestly don't know. I rubbed my face. He told me to wear my uniform to his ceremony. That's good, right? I think so. Maybe. God, why is this so complicated? She laughed. Because it's family. Family's always complicated. She sat on the edge of my desk. For what it's worth, I think you should wear it. Not to prove anything. Just to show him that you're proud of it. Same way he's proud of his chief's uniform. What if he makes another dig? Then you smile and let it roll off. You're a commander in the United States Navy. You've coordinated operations that kept people alive. You don't need his approval to know you're good at what you do. She stood. But I think, deep down, you want it anyway. And that's okay. That's human. She was right. I did want it. I'd always wanted it. The weeks before his ceremony blurred together. Work consumed me. There was always another brief, another exercise, another crisis that needed coordinating. But in the quiet moments, I thought about what I'd wear, what I'd say, how I'd handle it if he introduced me as just my kid and left out the rank. I thought about not going. Seriously considered it. What was the point of putting myself through another round of subtle humiliation? But every time I decided to skip it, I'd remember him teaching me to tie a bowline knot when I was 7. The way his face looked when I got it right on the first try. How he'd said, "Good. Now you're a sailor." I wanted him to look at me like that again. Just once. The ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in May, 1400 hours, at the Naval Station Chapel and Reception Hall. I drove down Friday night, checked into a hotel off base, and spent an hour staring at my dress whites hanging in the closet. The shoulder boards gleamed 3 stripes, the rank of commander. Same as his retired rank, just on the officer side. Would he notice? Would he care? I didn't sleep well that night. Growing up, my father was a legend in uniform. Not famous, not decorated with medals that made headlines, but respected in the way that matters on a ship, the kind of respect that came from showing up, doing the work, and never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. His dress whites were always starched sharp enough to cut, his ribbons aligned with geometric precision, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. When he walked into a room in uniform, conversations paused. I wanted to be like that. He taught me to swim before I could read, in the base pool at 0600 on Saturday mornings while other kids slept in. Cold water, no mercy, just him in the shallow end saying, again. You can do it again. I learned to tie knots before I could spell my own name, bowlin, clove hitch, sheet bend, his calloused hands guiding mine through the rope. Everything he taught me was practical, no nonsense, built on the assumption that someday I might need these skills to save my life or someone else's. When I was 10, he let me wear his old working uniform for career day at school. The sleeves hung past my hands, the pants pulled around my feet, but I felt like I was wearing armor. My teacher asked what my father did, and I said, he's a sailor. He keeps the ship running. The teacher smiled. Does he steer the boat? Ship, I corrected, already defensive. And no, he's a machinist's mate. He makes sure the engines work so everyone else can do their jobs. My father picked me up that afternoon and asked how it went. I told him what I'd said. He didn't say much, just nodded and squeezed my shoulder. That was enough. I joined the Naval Academy because of him. Not in rebellion, not to prove him wrong, but in reverence. I'd watched him deploy 6 times before I turned 18. Watched him come home exhausted, skin darker from the sun, eyes harder. Watched my mother hold herself together through every goodbye and fall apart quietly after he left. I saw what service cost, and I wanted to be part of it anyway. He'd worked his way up from seaman recruit at 18 to chief petty officer at 44, the classic blue-collar sailor's rise, one rank at a time, through exams and evaluations and sheer stubborn endurance. 26 years of standing watches, fixing broken equipment at 0300, mentoring young sailors who didn't know port from starboard. He'd earned everything. I took the officer's route for years at the academy, a commission and a career path that looked nothing like his. The day I got my acceptance letter, he congratulated me with a handshake. Not a hug, a handshake. Like I was joining a different branch entirely. You'll do fine, he said. Officers always do. There was something in his tone I didn't understand then. Something resigned. At the academy, I worked harder than I'd worked at anything. I wanted him to see that officers weren't soft, weren't just college kids playing sailor. I called home after every major accomplishment, making the honor roll, completing survival training, earning my surface warfare qualification. His responses were always the same, good. Keep it up. When I graduated and received my commission as an ensign, he attended the ceremony but didn't stay for the reception. I found him afterward, standing by his truck in the parking lot, still in his khakis. You leaving already? I asked. Long drive back. We're having dinner. I wanted you to meet some of I'm sure they're fine people, Vivian. But I don't belong at an officer's dinner. He opened his door. You looked good up there. Your mother would have cried. He drove away before I could respond. I didn't understand it then. Thought maybe he was just uncomfortable with crowds, with the formality. But over the years, I started to see the pattern. He'd come to my change of command ceremony when I took over a division, but he'd stand in the back and leave before the reception. He'd call after I made lieutenant, but the conversation lasted 3 minutes. He was proud, I think, in his own way. But there was a wall between us now, built brick by brick from the difference in our ranks. He called me college fleet sometimes, half mocking, half proud, but always with that edge. Like I'd chosen the easy way. Like my degree was a shortcut. I tried to explain once, during a rare visit home when I was 27. We were in the garage again, always the garage, and he was working on his truck. I told him about the 18-hour days, the impossible deadlines, the weight of being responsible for 100 sailors' lives and welfare. He listened, hands still moving on the engine. Then he said, sounds tough. But at least you get to sleep in your own rack every night, right? Not hot bunking with 2 other guys. That's not the point, Dad. Isn't it? He straightened, wiped his hands on a rag. Look, I'm not saying what you do isn't hard. I'm just saying it's different. You give orders. I took them. That's the way it works. We both serve the same mission. Sure. From different decks. He turned back to the truck. Doesn't make us the same. I left that night feeling more distant from him than ever. We both wore the same crest, the same anchor on our uniforms, but we'd never stood on the same deck. Never seen the Navy through the same lens. My Aunt Mary and his sister tried to mediate once. She'd never served, didn't really understand the military, but she loved us both and hated seeing us drift apart. She invited us both to Thanksgiving when I was 31, thinking maybe neutral ground would help. It didn't. Dad spent most of the dinner talking to my uncle about cars. When Marian asked about my work, I mentioned that I was coordinating exercises with allied navies in the Pacific. Dad snorted into his beer. Something funny? I asked. Just thinking about the old days, he said. When we actually fought wars instead of playing war games. These exercises prevent wars, Dad. That's the whole point. If you say so. He took another drink. We called it different back then. Aunt Marian changed the subject quickly, but the damage was done. I left before dessert. She called me the next day. He doesn't mean it the way it sounds. Then how does he mean it? He's intimidated, I think. You've surpassed him, Vivian. In rank, in education. He doesn't know how to relate to you anymore. I'm still his daughter. I know. But you're also a commander. And he's a retired chief. In his world, that means something. It shouldn't. No, she agreed. But it does. I thought about that conversation for years. Wondered if she was right. If the man who taught me to swim, to tie knots, to stand up straight and look people in the eye had somehow convinced himself that I'd left him behind. That I'd climbed too high to remember where I came from. But I remembered. I remembered everything. Every lesson, every early morning, every moment he showed me what it meant to serve. I just wished he could see that I was still the same person. Still the kid who wore his uniform to career day and felt like a giant. We both wore the same crest. We just never stood on the same deck. And maybe I started to think that was the real problem. Not that we were different, but that we'd never figured out how to be different together. The ceremony was in 3 days. I still didn't know what I'd say to him. Didn't know if there was anything to say that would bridge 20 years of distance. But I was going. I'd wear my uniform. I'd salute when appropriate. And maybe, if I was lucky, he'd finally see me. I threw myself into my work after that Thanksgiving. Not as punishment, not as distraction, just as the only thing that made sense anymore. Deployments, joint operations, coordination briefs that started at 0500 and ran until someone remembered we needed food. The Navy had always been my constant, the one thing I could control when everything else felt uncertain. It didn't care about family dynamics or unspoken resentments. It cared about mission readiness, operational effectiveness, and whether you could do the job. I could do the job. At 34, I was selected for command school, the pipeline for officers being groomed for major leadership positions. Commander Price called to congratulate me. This is huge, Vivian. You know what this means. More paperwork? She laughed. It means they're serious about you. Command school is where they separate the career officers from the ones who'll cap out at 05. You're going places. I should have been excited. Should have called my father, shared the news. Instead, I sent a text, got selected for command school. Starts in January. He responded 6 hours later. That's good. 2 words. That was it. Command school was intense. 12 weeks of strategic planning, leadership theory, crisis management, and enough case studies to make your head spin. We analyzed historical battles, dissected command decisions, learned how to make impossible choices under pressure. I thrived. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My father never asked about it. Not once. When I made commander at 38, I'd led crews twice his size, handled international coordination briefs, and seen combat zones he'd only read about in Navy Times. I'd coordinated air defense exercises with Japanese and Australian forces. I'd managed logistics for carrier strike groups operating in contested waters. I'd sat in classified briefings where we planned operations that would never make the news but kept people alive nonetheless. None of it mattered to him. Not because he didn't think it was important, but because he couldn't see it. To him, real Navy work happened in engine rooms and on deck plates, not in conference rooms and command centers. The Navy he knew was tactile, metal and grease and salt water. Mine was digital, strategic, abstract. He couldn't touch it, so he couldn't respect it. The promotion to O5 came through on a Thursday. The official message hit my inbox at 0830, and by 0900 my phone was ringing, colleagues calling to congratulate me, mentors checking in, people I'd served with years ago reaching out. It felt good. Felt earned. I waited until that evening to call my father. Wanted to catch him at a time when he'd have space to talk, when it wouldn't feel rushed. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Hey, Dad. Just wanted you to know I made commander. Oh, 5. Same rank you retired at, just on a different track. Anyway, talk soon. 3 days later, he texted, congrats. I stared at that single word for longer than I care to admit. Looked for subtext that wasn't there. Wondered if he was busy, if he was upset, if he even cared. Then I put my phone down and went back to work. Commander Price found me in my office later that week, going through deployment schedules for the next quarter. She knocked on the door frame. You've been avoiding people. I've been working. You've been hiding. She came in, closed the door. He didn't call, did he? I didn't ask who she meant. He texted. And nothing. He said congrats. That's it. She sat down across from me, her expression somewhere between sympathy and frustration. Vivian, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear it. Are you listening? Yes. You're a commander in the United States Navy. You have excelled at every level of your career. You have earned the respect of your peers, your superiors, and the people you've led. You are good at this. She leaned forward. Your father's inability to see that is his failure, not yours. I know that. Do you? Because you've been walking around like someone died. It's not that simple. It never is with family. She softened. Look, I get it. My father was Army, infantry, 3 tours in Vietnam. When I joined the Navy, he thought I'd lost my mind. Why would you go on a boat, he'd say. Real soldiers walk. It took him 15 years to admit I'd made the right choice. Did he ever respect it? Eventually. But not because I proved myself to him. Because he finally realized he didn't have to understand my path to respect that I'd chosen it. She stood. Your father might get there. He might not. But you can't keep waiting for his approval to feel good about what you've accomplished. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are 2 different things. The years between 38 and 42 were a blur of steady advancement and growing responsibility. I took command of a joint logistics task force, coordinating supply chains across 3 theaters. I deployed twice more, once to the Mediterranean, once to the Horn of Africa. I wrote policy papers, briefed flag officers, mentored junior officers who reminded me of my younger self, eager, uncertain, desperate to prove they belonged. My father and I spoke maybe twice a year. Birthdays, holidays. The conversations were polite, surface level. He'd ask if I was staying safe. I'd ask about his health. We'd both pretend that was enough. Then, 6 months before his retirement ceremony, he called me out of nowhere. It was a Tuesday around 1900 hours. I was at home, finishing dinner, when my phone rang. Vivian. His voice sounded older, rougher. Dad. Everything okay? Yeah. Fine. I wanted to tell you something. A pause. I'm retiring next May. Having a ceremony at the base. Nothing fancy. But I'd like you to be there. I set down my fork. Of course I'll be there. Good. That's good. Another pause. And, your Aunt Marianne is helping organize it. She said I should invite your friends too. People you served with. If you want. Are you sure? It's your ceremony. Yeah, well. Your Navy too. Might as well make it a family thing. It was the closest he'd come to acknowledging that we were in this together. Not the same path, but the same service. I'll be there, I said again. Wouldn't miss it. Okay, good. He cleared his throat. How's work? We talked for 20 minutes. He asked about my command, about the challenges of logistics coordination. I asked about his garden, his truck, whether he'd started any new projects. It wasn't deep. It wasn't a breakthrough. But it was something. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not from sadness, exactly. Just from the sheer weight of finally hearing him try. Of knowing that maybe, after all these years, he was starting to see me. Commander Price was right. I couldn't wait for his approval to feel good about my career. But I also couldn't pretend I didn't want it. Couldn't pretend it didn't matter. I was 42 years old, a commander in the United States Navy, with a record that spoke for itself. But part of me was still that 10-year-old in an oversized uniform, desperate to make her father proud. The ceremony was 4 months away. I marked it on my calendar, requested leave, and started preparing. Not just logistically, but emotionally. This would be his moment, his celebration. But maybe, just maybe, it could be a new beginning for us too. I didn't know then what would happen. Didn't know that everything was about to change. But I hoped. For the first time in years, I let myself hope. When the invitation arrived in January, I held it in my hands for a long time. Formal cardstock, Navy letterhead, his name printed in bold, Chief Petty Officer William Ellis, USN, Ret. The ceremony was scheduled for May 14th at 1400 hours. Reception to follow. My name was misspelled Vivian instead of Vivian, but I didn't care. He'd invited me. That was enough. I called to confirm I'd attend. He sounded surprised when he answered. You're actually coming? You invited me. Yeah, but you're always busy. Figured you'd have something more important. Nothing's more important than this, Dad. Silence. Then, quietly, thanks, kiddo. He hadn't called me that in years. I felt something crack open in my chest, something I'd kept locked down for so long I'd forgotten it was there. I'll be there, I said. Promise. The months leading up to the ceremony were consumed by work. I was in the final stages of coordinating a major joint exercise when my phone rang at 0200 on a Tuesday. Captain Laura Price, calling from her own command assignment in Japan. Tell me you're not still working, she said. Tell me you're not calling at 0200 your time, I countered. Touché. She laughed. I heard about your father's retirement ceremony. You going? Yeah. May 14th. Good. That's good, Vivian. A pause. You wearing your uniform? I don't know. He told me to once, but then he's been. I don't know. I don't want to make it weird. It's already weird. You're a commander and he's a retired chief. It's going to be weird no matter what you wear. She softened. But I think you should wear it. Show him that you're proud of what you've become. Same way he's proud of what he accomplished. What if he's not proud? Then that's his loss. But my money says he is. He's just too stubborn to say it. After we hung up, I pulled out my dress whites and inspected them. The shoulder boards were polished, the ribbons aligned perfectly, the fabric crisp. I'd worn this uniform to change of command ceremonies, promotion boards, formal dinners with foreign officers. It represented everything I'd worked for. But wearing it to my father's retirement felt different. Felt like a statement. 3 weeks before the ceremony, I got a call from Aunt Marianne. She was handling the logistics, venue, catering, guest list. Your father's being impossible, she said, exasperated. Won't tell me how many people to expect. Won't approve the menu. Won't do anything except insist it's not a big deal. Sounds like him. Vivian, he talks about you, you know. I went still. What? He talks about you. Not often and never directly, but he does. Last month, one of his old shipmates came by. They were going through photos, and your dad pulled out one from your academy graduation. He showed it to everyone. Said, that's my daughter. She's a commander now. My throat tightened. He said that. He did. He was proud, Vivian. I could see it. She paused. I know you two have your issues. But he loves you. He doesn't know how to show it. Especially now that you've surpassed him. I haven't surpassed him. In rank, you have. And that matters to him, even if it shouldn't. After that call, I made a decision. I'd wear my uniform. Not to prove anything, not to upstage him, but because it was honest. Because I'd earned it the same way he'd earned his. Different paths, same service. 2 days before the ceremony, I drove down to Virginia, checked into a hotel off base, and spent the evening reviewing my speech. Aunt Marian had asked me to say a few words during the reception, nothing formal, just a toast. I'd written and rewritten it a dozen times, trying to find the right balance between honoring him and acknowledging our complicated relationship. In the end, I kept it simple: gratitude, respect, recognition of his service. No hidden barbs, no passive aggression. Just truth. That night, I barely slept. Kept thinking about all the ways the ceremony could go wrong. What if he introduced me as just my daughter and left out the rank? What if he made another dig about officers? What if I'd built this up in my head and it turned out to be nothing? The morning of the ceremony, I put on my dress whites at 0600. The fabric felt heavier than usual, or maybe that was just my nerves. I looked at myself in the mirror, 3 stripes on each shoulder board, ribbons over my left breast, the surface warfare pin above them. I looked like what I was, a senior officer with nearly 2 decades of service. But I still felt like that 10-year-old wearing her father's uniform, hoping he'd notice. The ceremony started at 1400 hours. I arrived early, slipped into the venue, and found a seat in the back. The room filled quickly: old shipmates, former commanding officers, family friends. People who'd served with my father over 26 years. The energy was warm, nostalgic. Lots of sea stories and laughter. I stayed quiet, observing. Watching my father work the room in his dress blues, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. He was in his element here, surrounded by people who understood his world. Then he saw me. Our eyes met across the room. He froze mid-sentence, his expression unreadable. I gave a small wave. He nodded slowly, then turned back to his conversation. I told myself it was fine. This was his day. I was just here to support him. The ceremony itself was beautiful. His former commanding officer gave a speech about his dedication, his leadership, his unwavering commitment to the mission. They presented him with a shadow box containing his medals and rank insignia. There were photos, stories, even a video message from sailors he'd mentored who couldn't attend. Through it all, my father stood at attention, eyes forward, face composed. But I saw the emotion underneath. Saw the way his jaw tightened when they mentioned the deployments he'd missed birthdays and anniversaries for. Saw the way his hands shook slightly when they handed him the shadow box. 26 years. He'd given everything to the Navy. And now it was over. After the ceremony, the reception began. People mingled, drinks flowed, sea stories got louder and more embellished. My father moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. I hung back, not wanting to intrude. Then I saw him. Rear Admiral Thomas Reed, my father's former commanding officer from 15 years ago. He'd been a captain then, now he wore 2 stars. And he was walking straight toward me. The Admiral stopped mid-conversation with a group of retired chiefs, his eyes narrowing in recognition. For a second, I thought maybe he'd mistaken me for someone else. Then his posture shifted, became rigid, formal. Military. He walked straight toward me, cutting through the crowd. Conversations died in his wake as people noticed his trajectory. I straightened instinctively, awareness prickling up my spine. "Admiral Ellis," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. The room went quiet. Not all at once, but like dominoes falling, one conversation stopping, then another, until even the people by the bar had turned to look. My father's laughter died mid-sentence. He was standing near the front of the room, champagne glass raised in a toast someone had just proposed. His hand froze in midair. Admiral Reed came to attention in front of me. Then he saluted. Sharp. Crisp. The kind of salute that said this wasn't a formality, this was respect. "Ma'am," he said clearly. "I didn't know you were this old salt's daughter." Every head in the room turned. I could feel their eyes, their confusion, their sudden recalibration as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. A 2-star admiral. Saluting a woman most of them had probably assumed was just a family member. I returned the salute, keeping my face calm, professional. "Admiral Reed." "Good to see you, sir." He dropped his salute, but his posture stayed formal. "The honor's mine, Admiral. Your work in the Pacific Theater has been exemplary. We've been following your task force's logistics coordination. Outstanding results." "Thank you, sir." Someone near the bar whispered, "Did he just call her Admiral?" My father's voice cut through the murmur. "What did you call her?" Admiral Reed turned, genuine surprise on his face. "Admiral Ellis, sir. Your daughter." He looked between us, clearly confused by my father's reaction. "You didn't know?" "Didn't know what?" My father's champagne glass trembled slightly. She's a commander. Oh, 5. Same rank I was, Admiral Reed corrected gently. She was selected for flag rank 3 months ago. The official announcement went out last week. She's a rear admiral lower half now. Oh, 7. He turned back to me. I assumed family would be the first to know. The room spun. Not literally, but that's what it felt like. I'd been selected for admiral 3 months ago. And I hadn't been told. No, that wasn't right. I would have been told. Selection boards notified candidates immediately. Unless I'd been so buried in operational work that I'd missed it. Unless the notification had come through official channels while I was deployed, and I'd been too focused on the mission to check my personal messages. Unless I'd been so consumed by preparing for the ceremony that I'd ignored everything else. Admiral Reed was watching me carefully. You did know, didn't you, ma'am? My mind raced through the past 3 months. The deployment. The exercise. The long stretches of 18-hour days where I'd barely looked at anything that wasn't mission critical. I've been in the field, sir. I may have missed the notification. His expression shifted, concern mixed with something like amusement. Well, congratulations, Admiral. Though I imagine this isn't how you wanted to find out. The room erupted. Not in chaos, but in a wave of voices, congratulations, questions, shock. Someone started clapping. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire reception was applauding. I stood there, frozen, trying to process. Rear Admiral. Oh, 7. Flag rank. I'd made Admiral. And I'd found out at my father's retirement ceremony. In front of everyone he'd ever served with. My father stood motionless, his champagne glass still raised, his face unreadable. People were approaching him, congratulating him, saying things like, "Your daughter's an admiral, and you must be so proud." He nodded mechanically, but his eyes never left mine. I needed to fix this. Needed to make sure this didn't overshadow his moment. I moved through the crowd toward him, people parting to let me pass, their congratulations washing over me like white noise. "Dad," I said quietly when I reached him. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." He stared at me. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. Took in the uniform, the ribbons, the surface warfare pin. The 3 stripes on my shoulder boards that would soon be replaced with a star. "You made Admiral," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact. Apparently. "But this is your day. Your ceremony." "I'm not, you made Admiral." His voice was stronger now, louder. The room quieted again, people straining to hear. At 42 years old. Do you know how rare that is? Dad, no. He set down his glass. His hands were steady now. No, you need to hear this. From me. In front of everyone. He turned to face the room, his voice carrying the same command presence I remembered from childhood. I spent 26 years in the Navy. Worked my way up from nothing to chief. I was proud of that. Damn proud. He looked back at me. But my daughter? She's going to outrank everyone in this room except Admiral Reed. She's going to be making decisions that affect the entire fleet. And I've spent the last 20 years acting like what she does doesn't matter. Dad, you don't have to, yes. I do. He stepped closer, lowered his voice so only I could hear. I was wrong, Vivian. I was wrong to dismiss you. Wrong to make you feel like you weren't a real sailor because you went officer. Wrong to let my own pride get in the way of seeing what you'd accomplished. His eyes were bright. You're an admiral. My daughter is an admiral. My throat closed. I couldn't speak. He did something then that I'd never seen him do in uniform. He saluted me. Not the sharp, formal salute Admiral Reed had given, but something slower, more deliberate. More personal. I should have done this years ago, he said quietly. Should have recognized who you'd become. I returned the salute, feeling tears burn behind my eyes. I became this because of you. Because you showed me what service meant. He dropped his salute, and for a second, I thought he might hug me. Instead, he held out his hand. I took it. His grip was strong, certain. I'm proud of you, he said. I should have said it sooner. Should have said it every time you called with news. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you, Admiral. The room erupted again. This time, I let the applause wash over me. Let myself feel the weight of the moment, not just the promotion, but the recognition from the man I'd spent my whole life trying to impress. Admiral Reed appeared beside us, grinning. Well, this is certainly the most interesting retirement ceremony I've attended. He clapped my father on the shoulder. You raised a hell of an officer, Chief. Guess I did, my father said, still looking at me. Guess I did. The rest of the reception blurred together. People approached to congratulate both of us, my father on his retirement, me on the promotion I'd just learned about. Aunt Marion cried and hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. Master Chief Daniel Hollis, one of my father's old shipmates, told a story about the time my father had chewed out a junior officer for mistreating enlisted sailors. Your old man never gave a damn about rank, Hollis said. Only cared about doing right by his people. Looks like the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Later, when the crowd had thinned and people were beginning to leave, I found my father outside by the pier. He was standing at the edge, looking out at the water, still in his dress blues. The evening light caught the gold on his anchors, making them gleam. I stood beside him in silence. Ships moved in the distance. The wind carried the smell of salt and diesel. I really didn't know, I said finally. About the promotion. I should have been paying attention, should have stopped, he said gently. It's not your fault. You were doing your job. That's what matters. I didn't mean to overshadow your ceremony. He laughed, actually laughed. Vivian, you didn't overshadow anything. You made it better. Gave everyone something to talk about for the next 20 years. He turned to face me. Besides, what's a retirement ceremony without a little drama? Is that what we're calling this? Drama? I'm calling it long overdue. He looked back at the water. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not just for today, but for years. For every time I made you feel like what you were doing didn't matter. For every call I cut short, every achievement I brushed off. For making you think you had to choose between being my daughter and being an officer. You don't have to, yes, I do. His voice was firm. Because you deserved better. You deserved a father who celebrated you instead of resenting you. Who saw your path as different, not lesser. He paused. I think I was scared. Scared? That you'd forget where you came from. That you'd look down on enlisted sailors the way some officers do. That you'd lose the things that made you my daughter. He smiled sadly. But you didn't. You just grew. And I couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't have words for the mix of grief and relief washing through me. I'm not going to pretend the last 20 years didn't happen, he continued. We lost time. That's on me. But if you're willing, I'd like to try. To know you. Really know you. Not just as my kid, but as the officer you've become. I'd like that, I managed. He nodded. We stood there for a while longer, two sailors from different worlds, finally standing on the same deck. The sun was setting over the water, painting everything gold. Admiral Ellis, he said, testing it out. Has a nice ring to it. You don't have to call me that. I know. But I want to. He looked at me. At least sometimes. To remind myself that my daughter made something extraordinary of herself. I made something of myself because you taught me how. We'll agree to disagree on that. He smiled. Come on. Your aunt will kill us both if we miss the cake. We walked back toward the reception hall together, his dress blues and my dress whites catching the last light of day. Behind us, the ships moved through darkening water. Ahead of us, whatever came next. It wasn't resolution. Wasn't a perfect Hollywood ending. Just two people trying to find their way back to each other after years of distance. But it was a start. And sometimes, a start is enough. Later that night, I found myself back at the hotel, sitting on the bed with my phone in my hands. The adrenaline of the day had worn off, leaving me exhausted and strangely hollow. I'd just learned I'd made Rear Admiral lower half, a promotion that represented the culmination of 22 years of work, and I'd found out in front of a room full of strangers. I pulled up my official Navy email, the one I'd neglected for the past 6 weeks while coordinating the joint exercise. There it was, 3 months old, buried under operational updates and administrative notifications. Oh, 7 selection board results. I opened it. Read the formal language congratulating me on my selection, outlining next steps, requesting acknowledgement of receipt. The message had been sent in February. It was now May. 3 months of missed calls from the Bureau of Naval Personnel. 3 months of increasingly urgent messages asking me to confirm my acceptance and coordinate my promotion ceremony. I'd been so focused on being present for my father's retirement that I'd completely missed my own career milestone. I called Commander Price. It was late, but she picked up on the first ring. "Tell me you've seen the pictures," she said immediately. Admiral Reed posted on the O Club group. "You made Admiral and found out at your dad's retirement? That's the most Navy thing I've ever heard." "I missed the notification, Laura. For 3 months. How is that even possible?" I was in the field. Focused on the mission. Thought everything important would filter through operational channels. I laughed, but it sounded brittle. Turns out career-defining promotions don't get sent to your tactical email. Okay, but you know now. And your dad knows. And apparently everyone in the greater Hampton Roads area knows, because Admiral Reed can't stop telling people. She softened. "How are you actually feeling about all this?" "Overwhelmed. Grateful. Embarrassed that I made his ceremony about me." "You didn't make it about you. Life did. Sometimes timing is just funny like that." A pause. "How did he take it?" "Really?" "He saluted me, Laura. In front of everyone. Said he was proud." Her breath caught. "Vivian. That's everything you wanted." "I know. So why do you sound like someone died?" I thought about that. Because it took me making Admiral for him to see me. Because 20 years of excellent performance reviews and successful commands and leadership positions weren't enough. Because I had to reach flag rank before he could say he was proud. "Maybe," she said carefully. "Or maybe seeing you in that context, with Admiral Reed saluting you, made the reality of who you'd become undeniable. Sometimes people need external validation to see what's been in front of them all along. That doesn't make it hurt less." "No, it doesn't," she sighed. "But you can choose what to do with it now. You can hold on to the hurt, or you can accept that he's trying. Imperfectly, belatedly, but trying." After we hung up, I sat with that for a long time, trying to decide what I felt beyond the exhaustion. Part of me was angry at him for taking so long, at myself for needing his approval, at the whole situation. Part of me was relieved. And part of me was just tired. Tired of the distance, tired of proving myself, tired of wondering if I'd ever be enough. But he'd saluted me. That meant something. I spent the next week coordinating my official promotion ceremony with the Bureau of Naval Personnel. They'd been trying to reach me for months, and now they were scrambling to organize something appropriate for flag rank. The ceremony was scheduled for late June at the Pentagon, with the Chief of Naval Operations officiating. It would be formal, proper, everything by the book. My father called 3 days after his retirement ceremony. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "about your promotion." "Dad, we don't have to, I want to be there." "At the ceremony." "If that's okay." I went still. "You want to attend?" "I want to watch my daughter become an admiral. Official-like. The right way." He paused. "I know I wasn't there for a lot of your career milestones. Missed your O for ceremony because I had a deployment. Didn't make it to your change of command because I was too stubborn to ask for time off. I don't want to miss this one." "I'd like that," I said quietly. "I'd really like that." "Good. Your aunt is already planning the family gathering after. Fair warning, she's invited everyone. Cousins you haven't seen in a decade. The whole 9 yards." I laughed. "Of course she has. She's excited. We all are." His voice caught slightly. "I'm proud of you, Vivian. I know I said it at my ceremony, but I wanted you to hear it again. When it's just us. When I'm not performing for a room full of people." My throat tightened. "Thank you. You earned it. Every bit of it." He cleared his throat. "Okay, I'll let you go. I'm sure you have admiral things to do." "Not yet. Ceremony's not until June." "Still, you should practice being intimidating. That's what admirals do, right?" "That's exactly what we do." He laughed, and for the first time in years, it sounded easy. Natural. Like we were finding our way back to something we'd lost. The promotion ceremony in late June was everything the Bureau of Naval Personnel had promised: formal, dignified, attended by senior leadership from across the Navy. The Chief of Naval Operations spoke about my record, my leadership, my contributions to joint operations. They presented me with my first star, swapped out my shoulder boards, and officially welcomed me to flag rank. My father sat in the front row, in his dress blues with his chief's anchors gleaming. Aunt Marianne sat beside him, dabbing her eyes. When they called my name and I walked forward to receive my star, I glanced at him. He was standing, applauding, his face split in a grin wider than I'd seen in decades. After the ceremony, during the reception, he approached me. This time, he didn't hesitate. He pulled me into a hug, tight, certain, the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. "That's my daughter," he said to anyone who'd listen. "That's my daughter, the Admiral." Admiral Reed appeared, champagne in hand. "She's something special, Chief. You should be proud." "I am," my father said simply. "Took me too long to say it, but I am." The reception was warm, full of colleagues and mentors who'd supported me over the years. Commander Price flew in from Japan, presenting me with a vintage Navy compass as a gift. "So you always know where you're going," she said, "even when the path isn't clear." Later, after most guests had left, my father and I stood outside on the Pentagon steps, looking out over the Potomac. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him. "About being scared. About thinking I'd forget where I came from." "Yeah, I could never forget. Everything I am, every choice I've made, it all traces back to you. To watching you serve. To learning what it means to put something bigger than yourself first." I turned to face him. "I'm an admiral because you showed me what leadership looks like. Not from a textbook. From life." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, your mother would have been impossible at this ceremony. Would have cried through the whole thing, taken 1,000 photos, told everyone in a 5-mile radius that her daughter was an admiral. She would have been embarrassing. Completely." He smiled. "She'd also have been right. About you. About everything." We stood there as the sun set over Washington, two sailors from different generations and different paths, finally seeing each other clearly. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now that you're an admiral? New assignment. Bigger responsibilities. More meetings than I can count." I smiled. "But also more opportunities to make a difference. To take care of people. To honor the tradition we're both part of." "Sounds about right." He straightened his uniform. "Well, Admiral, your aunt is waiting. Something about a family dinner that's probably going to involve way too much food and 1,000 questions about your new job. You ready for that? Are you kidding? I'm going to tell the story of Admiral Reed saluting you at my retirement until everyone is sick of hearing it." He grinned. "That's what fathers do. Embarrass their kids. Even when the kid is an admiral? Especially then." We walked back inside together, toward whatever came next. The distance between us wasn't gone. 20 years of hurt doesn't disappear in a day. But it was smaller now. Manageable. Something we could work with. I didn't tell him that night about the other news I'd received that afternoon, an offer to serve as deputy director for a major joint task force, coordinating operations across all branches. The kind of position that could lead to even higher rank, more responsibility, more opportunities to shape the Navy's future. That conversation could wait. For now, I just wanted to be his daughter. And for him to be my father. Two sailors finally standing on the same deck. Now, whenever I stand at promotion ceremonies for others, I remember that moment. Remember my father's face when Admiral Reed saluted me. Remember the weight of his words. "I should have done this years ago." I've presided over dozens of ceremonies since then, ensigns receiving their first commissions, enlisted sailors making chief, officers advancing to command. Each time, I look into the audience and see the families watching. The parents who beam with uncomplicated pride. The ones who struggle to understand what their child has become. The ones who, like my father, can't quite reconcile the person they raised with the officer standing before them. I recognize them because I've lived it. 3 months ago, I presided over a ceremony for a young lieutenant commander taking her first major command. Her father attended, a retired Army Master Sergeant who'd spent 30 years in the infantry. When she walked forward to receive her orders, he stood at attention, rigid as a statue, tears streaming down his face. After the ceremony, he approached me. Admiral, can I ask you something? Of course. How do I? He struggled for words. How do I tell her I'm proud when I don't really understand what she does? When her world is so different from mine that I can't even follow the conversation. I thought about my father. About all the years he'd stayed silent because he didn't know how to bridge the gap between his Navy and mine. You tell her exactly what you just told me, I said. That you don't always understand, but you're proud anyway. That her path is different from yours, but that doesn't make it less valid. That you see her, even when you don't fully comprehend her work. I paused. And then you keep showing up. To ceremonies, to promotions, to the moments that matter. Presence is its own language. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Thank you, Admiral. I watched him walk back to his daughter, watched him pull her into a hug that said everything he couldn't articulate. Watched her face light up with relief and joy. That's what I try to remember now. That respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned, even from family. Especially from family. And sometimes, the recognition you've waited a lifetime for comes in unexpected moments, when you're not even looking for it. My father and I talk regularly now. Not every day, but enough. He asks about my work, and I explain it in terms he can understand. I ask about his projects, his garden, his health. We're learning each other again, slowly, carefully, like two people navigating unfamiliar terrain. He still calls me kiddo sometimes. But more often, he calls me Admiral. Not because he thinks rank matters more than our relationship, but because he knows what that rank represents. The years of work, the sacrifices, the dedication. He's learned to see both the daughter he raised and the officer I became as part of the same person. Last month, he drove 8 hours to attend a change of command ceremony where I was the guest speaker. He didn't have to. It wasn't a major event, just a mid-level command transition at a small base. But he came anyway, sat in the audience, and afterwards told everyone who'd listen, "That's my daughter. She's an admiral." On the drive back, we stopped at a roadside diner. Over coffee and pie, he told me stories about his early days in the Navy. Stories I'd never heard. About the chief who'd mentored him, who'd seen potential in a scared 18-year-old kid from rural Virginia and pushed him to be better. About the mistakes he'd made, the lessons he'd learned, the moments he'd doubted himself. "I never told you this," he said, "but I was terrified when you got accepted to the academy. Terrified you'd fail. Terrified you'd succeed and leave me behind. Terrified I wouldn't be able to relate to you anymore. And now? Now I realize that was never about you. It was about me. About my own insecurities." He smiled. "You didn't leave me behind, Vivian. You just took a different route. And I'm starting to see that both routes lead to the same place. Which is service. Taking care of people. Making sure the mission gets done." He raised his coffee cup. "To the Navy. All parts of it." I clinked my cup against his. "To the Navy." We finished our pie in comfortable silence, two sailors from different worlds who'd finally figured out how to exist in the same one. I think about that moment often. About how easily it could have stayed broken. How pride and stubbornness and fear could have kept us apart forever. How we almost let 20 years of silence become a permanent condition. But we didn't. We found our way back. Not perfectly, not without scars, but genuinely. That's what I tell young officers now, when they confide that their families don't understand their choices. I tell them about my father, about the years we spent on opposite sides of an invisible divide. I tell them that bridges take time to build, that some relationships require more patience than others, that you can't force someone to see you differently. But I also tell them that people can change. That understanding can come late but still matter. That sometimes the salute you've waited your whole life for arrives when you least expect it, in a moment that changes everything. My father is 70 now, his hair more gray than brown, his hands steady but worn. He gardens, works on his truck, meets up with old shipmates to swap stories. He's living the retirement he earned. And sometimes, when I visit, he'll pull out his old sea bag and show me things he's kept. Photos from deployments. Letters from sailors he mentored. His retirement shadow box, pride of place on his living room wall. Next to it, now, is a photo from my promotion ceremony. Me in my dress whites, the single star gleaming on my shoulder board, him standing beside me in his chief's uniform. Both of us smiling, finally on the same deck. "I'm proud of you," he tells me every time I visit. Not as a throwaway phrase, but as a statement of fact. "I'm proud of who you are and what you've accomplished." And every time I tell him the truth, "I'm proud of you too, Dad." Always have been. Respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned, even from family. But when it comes, when someone you love finally sees you for who you truly are, it's worth every year of waiting. Sometimes the salute you waited a lifetime for comes when you least expect it. And when it does, you hold on to it. You remember it. You let it remind you that time, patience, and persistence can heal even the deepest divides. That's my father's legacy to me. Not just the lessons about service and dedication, but the harder truth about relationships, that they're worth fighting for, even when it feels impossible. Especially then. I'm Rear Admiral Vivian Ellis, United States Navy. And I'm Chief Petty Officer William Ellis's daughter. Both truths matter. Both truths are real. And finally, after all these years, we both know it. Here's where I'll leave it for today. If this hit home, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your answers in the comments. Have you ever had to earn respect from family the hard way? What finally changed it? If you were in my shoes at that retirement, what would you have said to your parent? Did you ever get an apology that came years late? Did it help, or was it too late? What boundary are you drawing this year, and who needs to hear it from you? For those in uniform, past or present, what's one moment when you felt truly seen? Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. More real stories on standing your ground and rebuilding trust.